Synthetic Aperture Radar has pierced the Antarctic mantle, exposing massive, non-natural hexagonal grids buried kilometers deep. We are decoding these precise geometric anomalies that defy glacial movement patterns. By mapping these subterranean structures against ancient celestial alignments, we challenge the timeline of polar habitation and uncover a synchronized, global architectural blueprint. 1. The Great Silence Antarctica is a place of absolute crushing silence. It is 5.5 million square miles of frozen indifference, a continent that seems designed to erase the very memory of human existence. For centuries, we treated it as a blank space on the map, a white void where the only stories told were those of survival, frostbite, and the slow grinding crawl of ice toward the sea. But the ice is a liar. It's a 14-million-year-old veil, and for the first time in human history, that veil is becoming transparent. We've always known there were mountains under there, entire ranges like the Gamburtsevs, as tall as the Alps, completely entombed in frost. We knew there were lakes, liquid water trapped in total darkness for eons, but we didn't expect to find intent. We didn't expect to find geometry. Most people think of satellite imagery as a simple camera in space, taking snapshots of the ground. But standard photography is useless in the Antarctic interior. The glare of the snow and the sheer thickness of the ice sheet, sometimes stretching 3 miles deep, create a visual barrier that no lens can penetrate. To see what's really down there, you need something more aggressive. You need Synthetic Aperture Radar, or SAR. The SAR doesn't just look at the surface. It pulses microwave signals down through the ice. These signals bounce off the bedrock and return to the satellite, creating a high-resolution topographical map of the world beneath the white. And what the latest data from the newest generation of orbital sensors is showing us isn't just jagged rock or glacial troughs. It's showing us right angles. It's showing us massive, interlocking hexagonal grids. It's showing us patterns so precise, so massive, that they make the Great Pyramids look like a weekend DIY project. And no, you don't have to replay that part. It really happened. The data is sitting on servers in data centers from Maryland to Munich, and it is quietly dismantling everything we thought we knew about the history of our planet. 2. And the architecture of the impossible imagine standing on a sheet of ice 3 kilometers thick. Beneath your boots, there is more ice than there is air above you. Now, imagine that directly under that weight, etched into the very crust of the Earth, is a grid. These aren't small formations. The latest SAR scans have identified a series of hexagonal structures, each spanning several miles across, arranged in a honeycomb pattern that stretches for over 50 miles across the Queen Maud Land region. Geologists will tell you that nature loves a hexagon. You see them in the cooling of basaltic lava. Think of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. You see them in the salt flats of Bolivia. But nature's hexagons are messy. They are reactive. They vary in size based on the temperature of the cooling rock or the mineral content of the soil. The Antarctic anomalies are different. They are mathematically clean. The angles are consistent to within a fraction of a degree. Even more unsettling is their location. These structures are situated in areas where the subglacial topography should be chaotic, scarred by millions of years of tectonic shifts and the immense pressure of the ice sheet above. If these were natural rock formations, they should be crushed. They should be distorted by the plastic flow of the ice, which acts like a slow-motion river, grinding the bedrock into dust. Instead, these patterns remain rigid, defying the laws of glacial erosion. It's as if something is reinforcing the crust from below, or perhaps more chillingly, and as if the structures themselves are part of a foundation that predates the ice entirely, a foundation designed to withstand the weight of a continent. Think about the scale for a second. We are talking about a subterranean footprint that dwarfs any modern city. If you were to look at this from above, without the ice in the way, it wouldn't look like a mountain range. It would look like a motherboard. 3. The Piri-Reis paradox. To understand why this is so disruptive, we have to look back at one of the greatest cartographic mysteries in history, the Piri-Reis map. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map using dozens of older source maps, some of which he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. The map is famous for its remarkably accurate depiction of the South American coastline. But it's the bottom of the map that causes the real headaches. It appears to show the northern coast of Antarctica, but here's the catch. It shows Antarctica without ice. It depicts bays, islands, and mountain ranges that were only discovered and mapped by modern sonar and satellite technology in the mid-20th century. For years, skeptics laughed this off as a coincidence or a misidentification of the South American tip. But as our SAR data gets better, the coincidence is starting to look like a record. If Piri Reis's source maps were accurate, it means someone was mapping the Antarctic coastline when it was free of ice. According to mainstream geology, that hasn't been the case for at least 15 million years. Human beings, at least the ones we know about, weren't supposed to be around then. We were barely walking upright 2 million years ago. The hexagonal grids revealed by the new satellite data align almost perfectly with the coastal features described in these impossible ancient maps. It suggests that the geometry we are seeing isn't a geological fluke. It's the remains of a pre-glacial civilization, one that understood the world's geography long before we even invented the wheel. 4. The celestial synchronization. If the sheer size of these structures doesn't give you pause, their orientation will. Archaeologists have long known that the Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a degree. We know that Stonehenge marks the solstices and that Angkor Wat is a mirror of the constellation Draco. Ancient humanity was obsessed with the stars, not just for navigation, but for synchronization. When we take the coordinates of the Antarctic hexagonal grids and plug them into astronomical modeling software, correcting for the Earth's crustal shift over tens of thousands of years, something remarkable happens. These grids don't just point up. They align with the same celestial markers found in the layout of the Teotihuacan complex in Mexico and the ruins of Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. It's a synchronized, global architectural blueprint. It's as if there was a standard operating procedure for building on a planetary scale. Why hexagons? In geometry, the hexagon is the most efficient shape for tiling a surface. It provides the maximum area with the minimum perimeter. It's the shape of efficiency. If you were building a massive interconnected global network of structures, hexagons would be your go-to. But who was coordinating this? How do you maintain the same mathematical precision and celestial alignment across continents that, according to our history books, had no contact with one another? The SAR data suggests that Antarctica wasn't just a remote outpost. It may have been the hub, the 0 point of a civilization that viewed the Earth not as a series of isolated lands, but as a single, integrated machine. 5. The pressure of the deep. There is a technical detail in the satellite data that often gets overlooked by the headlines, but it's the part that keeps researchers up at night. It's the thermal signature. Ice is a great insulator, but it also reacts to heat from below. If these hexagonal patterns were just cold, dead stone, they would show up as simple density anomalies. But the SAR sensors are picking up something else. Subtle variations in the dielectric properties of the ice directly above the grids. This suggests a heat differential. Even now, miles beneath the surface, There is a minute but measurable temperature variation following the lines of the geometry. It's not enough to melt the ice. If it were, we'd have seen huge sinkholes by now. But it's enough to change the way the radar waves pass through it. Is it geothermal? Possibly. But why would geothermal activity follow a perfect hexagonal grid? Volcanoes don't erupt in right angles. The alternative is much more provocative. It suggests that the structures themselves are still doing something. Perhaps they are conducting Earth's internal heat, or perhaps they are part of a massive, ancient power management system that hasn't quite turned off. It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? The idea of a sleeping machine the size of a continent buried under the ice. But as we look at the data, the precision of the lines, the celestial alignments, the thermal anomalies, the rational geological explanations start to sound even more far-fetched. We are forced to ask a question that changes the very definition of human history. If we found this on Mars, we would call it a definitive sign of an alien civilization. Why are we so afraid to call it the same thing when we find it under our own feet? 6. The timeline problem. We like to think of history as a straight line. We started in caves, we discovered fire, we built huts, then temples, then skyscrapers. It's a comfortable narrative of upward progress. But the Antarctic data suggests that history might be cyclical. Or worse, it might be a story of downward regression. If a civilization capable of mapping the globe and building massive, geometrically perfect structures existed 20,000 or 50,000 years ago, what happened to them? The answer might be the ice itself. Geological records show that Antarctica hasn't always been a frozen wasteland. There were periods when it was covered in temperate forests, when the air was warm and the seas were clear. But Earth's climate is a fickle thing. Whether through a sudden crustal displacement, a theory championed by Charles Hapgood and famously supported by Albert Einstein, or a rapid shift in axial tilt, the green Antarctica was snapped into a deep freeze. Imagine a global superpower today. Satellite networks, massive cities, precision engineering. Now, I'd imagine a climate shift so rapid that within a few generations, your entire heartland is buried under a mile of ice. The survivors would be scattered. They would flee to the higher ground of South America, Egypt, and Asia. They would bring with them the seeds of their knowledge, the geometry, the astronomy, the architectural blueprints. But they wouldn't have the tools. They would try to rebuild using the materials at hand. They would build pyramids out of stone to mimic the structures they lost. They would carve the stars into temple walls so they would never forget the time before. The massive geometric patterns we are seeing today aren't just ruins. They are the original blueprints. They are the prototypes for everything we consider ancient history. 7. The hidden guardians. As this data becomes harder to ignore, the question shifts from what is it to who is controlling the narrative. Antarctica is the only place on Earth that isn't a country. It's governed by the Antarctic Treaty, a unique international agreement that bans military activity and encourages scientific cooperation. But it's also the most restricted place on the planet. You can't just fly to the interior. You need permits, logistics, and a massive amount of funding. The areas where these SAR anomalies are most prominent are often designated as specially managed areas, off limits to all but a handful of authorized researchers. There are stories, whispers from contractors who work at McMurdo Station or the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, of anomalous seismic events that don't match earthquake patterns. The stories of massive cargo planes landing in the dead of the Antarctic winter when no flights are supposed to be possible. Is it a cover-up, or is it a realization? If the world's governments have seen this data, and they have, they know that acknowledging it would mean rewriting every history book, every religious text, and every political boundary on the planet. It would mean admitting that we are not the first, and we are certainly not the most advanced, to call this planet home. 8. The conclusion of the beginning. We are standing at the edge of a new era of discovery. The age of exploration didn't end with the mapping of the continents. It's only just beginning beneath the ice. The hexagonal grids of Antarctica are a message. They are a reminder that the Earth has a memory longer than our own, and they challenge us to look past our modern arrogance and realize that we are living on a palimpsest, a parchment that has been written on, erased, and written on again. As the ice continues to shift and the satellites continue to pulse their signals into the deep, the patterns will only become clearer. We can choose to ignore them, to call them geological curiosities, and to cling to our comfortable, linear history. Or we can choose to look. We can choose to decode the geometry, to follow the celestial alignments, and to face the reality that the most important discovery in human history isn't waiting for us in the stars. It's waiting for us in the cold. It's waiting for us in the dark. It's waiting for us to remember.